Well, hello, ladies and gents. Robert Sykes, KetoSavage.com, and I've got another A.M.A. for you today. This one's all about building muscle versus toning muscle. But before we dive into this, let's roll the intro. All right, so today's question is brought to us from Dana, and she asks, is there a difference in toning muscle and building muscle? I have heard light weights and a lot of reps to tone and heavy weight and less reps to build muscle. What would be the benefit of each if so? All right, so first of all, I would like everybody to remove the word toning muscle from your vocabulary. It's kind of like this arbitrary word. It doesn't make any sense. It's like an oxymoron almost. So you can build muscle or you can lose body fat. When you lose body fat, especially in the context of having a decent amount of lean muscle tissue, you're going to have this toned look. It's not that you're toning muscle, it's just that you're losing the body fat around the muscle, which prevents it from having the definition that you want. So if you're wanting to tone, you simply lose body fat. Ideally, you've got a good foundational base of muscle there for shape to begin with. If you don't have that much muscle, then you'd probably benefit from prioritizing building muscle. And the more muscle you have, the higher your metabolism is going to be. The more muscle you have, the better. You're going to have more bone density, more structure there. It's great from a longevity standpoint. Lots of benefits to having more lean muscle tissue. But in the context of this question, the whole toning is less weight, more reps versus less reps, more weight. Let's just flesh that back a little bit. Let's peel the curtain back and dive into that. So my training doesn't really change when I'm in a building phase or a cutting phase. I'm honestly lifting pretty much the same. I'll add more cardio in a cutting phase, but the actual training itself stays pretty consistent. A lot of people think it's all about just volume, overall total volume. Volume in your training is basically found by multiplying the weight you push times the number of reps you push that weight times the number of sets that you do for a given exercise. If you multiply those three together, you get the total volume for that lift. And a lot of people assume that it's volume is all that matters. The more volume, the more muscle. And there's a lot of context matters in that regard too. So you can lift 1 pound 100 times, or you can lift 100 pounds one time. That's going to be the same volume. That's going to elicit a different type of result for each. Generally speaking, I tend to gravitate towards lifting heavier whenever possible. Not to sacrifice the quality of your form, not to risk injury, but when you're lifting heavier, you're going to be engaging your central nervous system more. It's going to elicit more of a stimulus response that's going to generate more lean tissue built, especially in the context of making sure you've got enough amino acids, enough protein, enough overall calories. But if all of those things are solid, if you're consuming enough food, if you're taking in enough protein, if you're giving your body the right nutrients, the right building blocks, then I would gravitate towards making sure you're lifting as heavy as you possibly can with good form. And I don't necessarily recommend just doing one rep at that. There is kind of a sweet spot in that, 6 to 12 rep range. That's been researched a lot. Bodybuilders have been using that sweet spot rep range for years now. There's a lot of efficacy in that. A lot of powerlifters will do a much lower rep count, and they'll start to lift in the 1 or 2 or 3 rep range max. But honestly, I think that's a little too low, especially when you're trying to take into the whole context of just lifestyle in general. Because when you start doing just 1 rep maxes, for instance, you're not being able to lift a given weight for multiple reps, then your cardiovascular system is probably taking a hit as well. At the same time, you don't want to be doing 100 rep sets because then you're taxing your cardiovascular system a lot, but you're not really getting the benefit during that hypertrophy range and strength building window. That's where that 6 to 12 rep range really comes into play. You want to make sure you're able to lift enough reps so that your cardiovascular system is in check. For instance, when I'm doing squats, when I've been doing all my heavy primary compound movements, I've been doing like 10 rep sets. And that's kind of on the upper end of that window. I may benefit from dropping that down to like 6 or 8 reps instead of 10 reps, but I like 10 reps because it's kind of really a good gauge as to how cardiovascularly healthy I am. If I'm able to rock out a heavy 10 rep set on squats and I'm able to, maintain proper breathing control throughout that entire set, I'm not getting super winded, then I'm probably pretty healthy in that regard too. A lot of people, they'll get so winded in especially a building phase and off season because they're not taking any attention towards cardio health that they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot because they get gassed out before they've gotten that many reps into a set. And if you're sacrificing that, then you're going to lose overall total volume in the end anyways. So personally, I like to stay within that 6 to 12 rep scheme. Sometimes I'll go up to 15 reps. Sometimes I'll go down to 3 or 4 reps. Now, I like to kind of cover my bases and hedge my bets, so to speak. So what I've been doing with my personal training protocol is I'll have 2 muscle groups that I'm training with each day. One of those muscle groups is focused on heavier movements, so my primary heavy compound movements like deadlift, bench, squats, overhead press, things like that, and then other supportive exercises, and I'm staying within that 6 to 8 rep range on most of those. On some I'll go up to 10, but most of them are just heavier weights with a little bit fewer reps. And then on my other day, I'll do on my other body part, I'll do a hypertrophy focused in which I'm staying within that 12 to 15 rep range. So a little bit lighter, more auxiliary type movements, but right there in that same, right there in that upper rep window. And then I'll swap those the next time I work those same muscle groups. So say I'm doing heavy back hypertrophy biceps one day, the next time I work those two together, I'll be doing hypertrophy biceps. No, I just swapped that around. I'd be doing heavy biceps hypertrophy back. So I'm kind of alternating and covering my bases there. But I do that throughout the entire year, whether I'm in a building phase or a cutting phase. I manipulate my macronutrients and I manipulate my cardio where I'm trying to lose body fat and tone. But I'm not really changing my training style. That said, a lot of people are under the misunderstanding that if you're trying to lose body fat, and they have to do higher reps, lower weight, they'll start decreasing the weight that they're using. And that can really be a negative thing as well, because when you start dropping the overall volume, the overall resistance that you're pulling in the gym, then you're removing that stimulus from your body in the first place. And if you're trying to lose body fat and tone, then you're probably going to be having fewer calories during that phase as well. If you have fewer calories in your system and you're also cutting the weight that you're typically lifting by a pretty good percentage, then your body's going to become more catabolic and likely tap into your lean muscle mass for, to make up for that loss in calorie consumption. And that's the last thing you want. One of the best things you could do to prevent that catabolic response and have the most muscle sparing, be as muscle sparing as possible, is to simply continue to lift as heavy as possible throughout your cutting phase as well. That's also, for whatever reason, very misunderstood. But when you're it's harder, when you have fewer calories in your system, it's harder to continue to lift heavy. But when you're in a contest, when you're into contest prep, when you're cutting calories, simply ensuring that you're lifting as heavy as you possibly can with good form and continuing to lift those weights in the gym is going to be one of the best things you could do from a muscle sparing standpoint. So again, to recap, you're not going to try and just go through a toning phase, remove toning from your vocabulary. It's simply cutting body fat in order to bring out more definition and shape in the muscle that you already have. But again, you don't need to change your lifting so much. Try and lift as heavy as you can with good solid form. You can kind of cover your bases and hedge your bets like I am explaining with that heavy hypertrophy style split, but don't feel like you have to do a ton of reps or very few reps at a single rep max. Try and be in that sweet spot there and kind of cover your bases with both. So that'd be my advice there. Thank you again for the question, Dana. You requested chocolate malt keto bricks, so I've got some of those headed your way right now. For anybody that does not know how this works, if you submit a question in the description below via that Google form link, and I use your question in these A.M.A. videos, I will send you some free keto bricks of your choosing. Appreciate y'all. I'll talk to you next time.